And we are up in space from a comic book store and a living room?
Office.
Office. Nice. So, this is episode 2 of the Riker Maneuver, where we are going to be talking about Star Trek Enterprise, episode 2, Fight or Flight. Joining me this week again is Joe Deckelmeyer,
the new recruit,
and Eric Berry.
How's it going, guys?
So this week, it looks like I'm peeking out a little bit here. So there's, in addition to actually talking about the episode this week, we were talking about this a little bit right before we went on. This episode is where we meet the Axanar, sort of. Like we had already sort of had an introduction to them in Star Trek, the original series, but this is first contact with them. Mm-hmm. And that's that kind of leads us into the discussion about the fan film. And I know, Joe, you said that you don't really have a whole lot of backstory.
Yeah, the basic knowledge I have is that I know that there was a fan film that was pretty well done, and they brought some actors back. And what ended up happening is that I think it was CBS was like they put a kibosh on it. They weren't going to do it. But I also know that there was some shady dealings with some of the business stuff that they were doing.
What I seen was that they were using some of the money that they had gotten.
Josh, your mic is out. That's what Shay is saying.
Huh. Let's try that again. I show levels.
So
I don't know. But yeah, I'd seen that they had spent some of the money on studio space that they were then renting out to other people. So
right.
Like the whole thing was that they weren't actually using the money that they were making from the Kickstarter for the film. And I know, Eric, you said that you know quite a bit about this.
Yeah, so for anyone that's interested in like doing a deep dive on this, there's actually a website that chronicles like the whole timeline of the lawsuit, everything that happened. It breaks down all of the Star Trek fan film guidelines. It's called axamonitor.com. They're also on Twitter. And it's a very like non-biased look at everything that happened and fact-checking a lot of some of the things that the people who made Axanar kind of lie about or misdirect about. And really, it started with this idea of this movie that they wanted to do based on like a one-time character in the original series, and they did
Garth of Izar.
Garth of Izar, and so he was kind of like this idol to Captain Kirk because he was this Starfleet captain that saved this world of the Axanar, and there was like this whole battle that we never saw on screen. So what they wanted to do was kind of bring that story to life with this fan film. And they did, the only thing that they ever really filmed was a short, kind of like 10-minute video called Prelude to Axanar, which helped kick off their first like Kickstarter campaign. And that was something I donated to. I was expecting, I really liked what they did with Prelude. I was excited for it. And everything, the Kickstarter was started in like 2014, and it took years for them to even do anything. And all this stuff started to come out about, shady business practices and, them trying to do merchandising with the Star Trek IP when they didn't even have the rights for it.
Wow.
And yeah, so they never got permission. And, there's a difference between like a Star Trek fan film and something that's trying to go above and beyond and, do something greater to profit off the fan base. And I believe that first Kickstarter made, over like $600,000.
What?
Yeah, it was an insane amount of money.
Time out. So, Eric, question.
Yeah.
Because you were obviously a big advocate of it when it started off, and even when you were describing it, like in theory, it sounds really cool. But as a fan, when you were like in that moment of because at the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, fan
Mhm.
films just in general weren't like huge at this point, right?
Well,
Or were they?
for Star Trek and for Star Wars, they were always kind of a big thing. Like
Right.
Both Lucasfilm and CBS Paramount had rules in place that were like, listen, we know you guys are going to make fan films. Here are the rules for what you can use and what you can't use, and then things like this kind of start getting out of control. So this actually set off like a whole like mega thing within the industry about what is a fan film and what can fans.
So the
do.
folks that were doing Axanar, were they trying to like slide it in like it was like more like a bigger budget, like an actual replacement for Star Trek?
Yes, and that because at the time,
Wow.
this was before we've had Discovery. This was before we had the relaunch of the current
Star Trek
series.
Continues was going on about around the same time that this was happening, right?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple big fan films. Star Trek Continues was actually very well done, but they didn't take a lot. They didn't take any money from fans. It was like a real labor of love. And so there's been successful Star Trek fan films before, and there's like a whole big drama within that community because the creator of Axanar hated the creator of Star Trek Continues. Big drama stuff. So what Axanar was trying to do, they were trying to say, look, we get these crappy JJ movies. They weren't big fans of them. They're like, we get these movies. It's not what Star Trek fans want. Look what we can do as fans, and we can do it better. And that was the whole prelude to Axanar. That was a proof of concept to show, look, we can get the big names. We can get the people involved in this. And that was their proof of concept for this Kickstarter. Well, that ended up being the only thing that they filmed for it. And the thing that got
Wow.
CBS, the only thing that got CBS involved was they saw this Kickstarter campaign kick off, and yeah, like they had a Kickstarter for Prelude to Axanar, which raised $100,000, and with that $100,000, they produced that one fan film, and then they used that to kick off the actual Axanar campaign, and that campaign had over like 8,500 backers, and it was like $640,000 that they raised.
Holy
Right?
shit.
So
this is nuts.
Yeah, so that's what got CBS and Paramount's attention. Like, whoa, you can't be making this type of money off of our IP like this. And it was because they were using concepts that were completely related to Star Trek. Like, when you get that close as a fan film, and then you're spending all this money for studio space, which they were just renting out to other productions to make even more money. So CBS saw all that and decided to sue them. So there's a whole timeline about this on axamonitor.com. And like I said, if you want to get into like the legal briefs and
Whoa.
the settlement and all that stuff, and this led to the creation of the Star Trek fan film guidelines. And you can go to startrek.com/fan-films, and all of the guidelines are there. And that is a direct result of this lawsuit.
Quick question. So this obviously, like, I find this super fascinating for a couple reasons. Number one,
We're kind of living in that world right now.
well, no, not just that, but number one, I feel that like, because look, I love Enterprise, and I was kind of thrust into this world, but I feel like you pull this Star Trek onion layer back a little bit,
Yep.
it just gets more and more intriguing. I had no clue, because now this to me is like, this is a very fascinating subject, because you're right, Josh, a little bit. And Eric, you would know this too, because you and I both
Sure.
are frequent the Power Ranger community. It's fascinating because I had no idea that this Axanar thing made such a big uproar that CBS, I had no idea it made $600,000. And then
Yeah.
I had no idea that it made such a large uproar that it almost changed the game of fan films. Like, this is
Yep.
crazy to me
Yeah.
that it was so impactful. Now, let me ask you another question, Eric. So Axanar, and this is going to lead up to the episode we're doing, but the Axanar, they at the fan film, they didn't call it Star Trek exactly, right? They just called it Axanar, right?
Right.
and left the rest fairly like you got to figure it out. But all the actual pieces were there for Star Trek fans to be like, well, it's pretty easily relatable.
Right.
So they were passing it off as the real deal.
Yeah, they had ships that were like original series era type ships. They had the uniforms that were very similar. They used different Delta shields. And these Kickstarter had like perks for patches that you could get made, like Starfleet patches, and you could get a uniform from the production and all that stuff.
Weren't there like people that had been like actual like crew people from Star Trek that were involved in this too?
There were some crew people. I know a big famous one was Robert Meyer Burnett, who actually produced the TNG Blu-rays, and he was going to be a director for Axanar. And then, after this lawsuit and during the lawsuit, there was a big fallout between him and Alec Peters, who created Axanar.
Now, with Axanar currently, where do people stand in the Star Trek community about Axanar? Are some still like, you know what, this is probably one of the best things that was going to happen? Or are there more people that are like, thank God this kind of got shut down? Because I feel like it can be very divisive.
Here's the thing. It's not shut down.
So it's still going.
So, yeah, after the settlement, CBS said, hey, you can still make this, but it's limited to 30 minutes, and you can no longer, profit off the merchandise. Well, I mean, I get Kickstarter updates here and there from them, even though I got refunded for part of it. It was, they're still to this day, they're like, oh, hey, we've got perks that are still shipping 6 years later.
Jesus.
And they're still trying to make this thing. And over the years, it has really divided parts of the Star Trek community. There are diehard people that still support Axanar, and there are people who got really burned by this, myself being one of them. And the only Kickstarter or the only campaign that was successful was, in terms of getting all the perks out and getting things produced, was the Prelude to Axanar. I've got the Blu-ray, I've got the CD, and I don't even want to look at those things, because what happened afterwards and with the lawsuit left a really bad taste in my mouth. Sure. And it wasn't just for Star Trek. I was wary of any crowdfunding at the time.
I can imagine that. I can absolutely imagine that, because I feel that I can only speak for the Power Ranger fandoms. That's the only ones that I'm really super familiar with in terms of fan films and stuff. And man, some people have gotten burned there too. So I can understand the hesitation and be like, is this, you know what I mean? Like, is this going to happen? Is this going to be a thing? Right. Because in our community, we got burnt too. But man, this is nuts. I had no idea. That's crazy.
It's a rabbit hole, man.
Like, it's interesting too, because I do remember going to cons and stuff and seeing like the Axanar booth.
Yeah.
And like them doing a full-on promotion.
They had huge booths at the conventions.
Now that I look back, it's interesting, man. I look back now and I was like, damn, there's so many cool Star Trek opportunities that I missed out on because I didn't know what I was missing. But you know what? Here we are, right? Talking about fight or flight, which I actually like.
Really quick before we get to the episode, let's head to the chat for a second. Can you see what people are saying there?
Bam! I absolutely can. So we got Donnie Pearson. He says my introduction to J.J. Abrams was the 1990 movie he co-wrote, Taking Care of Business. Either that or Felicity. We also says he's hoping for a Star Trek Power Rangers comic crossover. Just saying, now that Paramount, the studio behind Star Trek movies, is producing the new Power Ranger movie reboot, maybe there's a crossover that could happen there. Who knows?
IDW has the license for both Star Trek and for Power Rangers.
No, Boom Studios has Power Rangers. Yeah. IDW has Star Trek.
Sorry. Hasbro works with IDW though, so
correct.
There's definitely potential there.
Stanky Boy, thank you for joining us, Stanky Boy. He says they were going to sell official model kits of their Axanar ships.
Oh, the merchandising they had was crazy. At one point, they even worked with this local coffee house to make Axanar blends of coffee. It was ridiculous.
I'm not gonna lie, Eric. If I knew there was a Star Trek coffee, to say that I wouldn't drink it would be I would definitely
Right.
drink.
I might too. So
Like, no joke. Hold on. If they would have come out with like Trips catfish as like a dish or something, I'm all in. 100%.
I would have absolutely done that. Yeah.
I don't think we've had it posted on the website yet. I wrote up a small piece. Toy Toys. You know who they are. They've sent us some stuff in the past. They just released on Friday a set, or no, maybe it was Thursday. They just released a set of Star Trek, Starfleet insignia stemless wine glasses.
Those are sick.
I sent you the link for them. You can buy a set of 4. You can buy each one individually, but each of them have the Starfleet insignia, and then inside of it, it's either the symbol for command, engineering, sciences, or medical, and they're laser etched into the glass. They all look super dope.
Yeah,
So
see,
like Star Trek merchandise, those, like, I'm not a big collector's guy, but some of the merchandise that they have is just so
no
amazing.
joke. I thought about this, and I was thinking, man, if we ever did like a party or something at a Star Trek convention, because we did that big Power Ranger prom thing, right? So if we ever did one at a Star Trek convention, I would really like to do like the kind of like the commissary. No, I kind of want to do the commissary where it's kind of like you put in the order and it kind of shows up, but it's like all pre-made food.
What were those called? Automats?
Yeah, they're sick.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
but honestly, if put something on the menu like Trips catfish, I'm in.
Oh yeah.
I do like this Phantom a lot. But you know what? I think I realized something in the course of between last week and this week why I do kind of like Star Trek so much now is because I didn't realize how progressive the show was about the message they were sending out necessarily. I knew it was I knew the tropes of science fiction. I knew the tropes of like going to planets and exploring. I knew that, but I didn't really pay attention to the actual messaging that was there. And I find the Star Trek message like pretty beautiful. Like I really do.
Yeah,
and I think that's why I kind of just got into it.
I feel like that's honestly, like, as much as I like the new movies, like the JJ movies and the Justin Lin movie Beyond, I think that's one thing that they were lacking. Like that message that's just inherently built into most Star Trek episodes. It didn't feel like it was really there on the surface for those.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do such a good job at doing it on Enterprise. I'm so excited to see. And honestly, so I do remember watching some of the old 60s stuff and thinking, wow, this is very progressive for the 1960s. It's very ahead of its time. And I'm happy that Star Trek has always kind of been able to stay ahead of its time, which I find very, very good. But let's dive into this because Fight or Flight is technically episode 3, because the pilot's considered 1 and 2 if you look anywhere else. But it's the actual physical second episode to air when it was airing. Josh, take it away, because I think there's a lot to unpack here, and the reason why Axanar is important is because we get a little bit of we get some Axanar here.
Yeah. So this episode, it's actually really interesting to me, kind of where this starts off, because Enterprise is kind of taking a lead from where DS9 had headed in its later seasons, with it being still an episodic show where you've got, the not the monster of the week, but the alien of the week type thing. But it's picking up right where Broken Bow left off, with now, okay, they're out in space and Archer wants to get out there and wants to explore, and that's obvious from the conversations that he's having with T'Pol, that she's like, well, why would we go out and explore unless we actually had a reason to? He's like, to explore. So to me, like, where that's kind of going is like a perfect continuation of the setup for the series. Like it's just building on that mythos.
Wait, another question I have too. This is for Eric, because I think a lot of our Power Ranger fans are going to know who you are from Ranger Command Power Hour, which you put out an episode today, by the way. Thank you very much, because that was that. But I something that they may not know is, how did you get into Star Trek? Something I don't even know is how you got into it.
Sure. So I am a second generation Trekkie. My dad was a fan in the late 60s, 70s, when they started doing the reruns in syndication. I believe he went to one of the first Star Trek conventions that they ever did in New York, the big famous Star Trek convention. And so I was 5 years old when Next Generation premiered in '87. So that's going to date me, but
we're the same age.
Yeah. So I distinctly remember my dad set me right in front of the TV and we watched the premiere of Star Trek Next Generation, and I've been a fan ever since. So I've been in the fandom for most of my life, and as a kid, it's all about, oh wow, aliens and spaceships and lasers, and look how cool this is. But then I grew up, and uh, I I was in high school when Voyager was airing, and then college for Enterprise. So in those formative years, I really latched on to Voyager and Enterprise. Those are pretty much my top favorite shows. But I'm always nostalgic for TNG. Like TNG is like my MMPR
Sure.
for Power Rangers.
Now, go ahead.
Yeah.
So no, the other question I had too was that, like, since, because just like we're kind of going back and exploring Star Trek from its roots, or really should, like, kind of roots from Enterprise, at least story wise, it's really rooted there. This is also an exploration for me into the fandom. So just out of curiosity,
Sure.
Eric, I've never been to a Star Trek convention, and to tell you the truth, like, it's crazy because honestly, Josh may have been my only friend that I had that was really deep into Star Trek in a way that I was exposed to. So what are some of the rights and wrongs in, like, the fan community for Star Trek? For example, I know what they are in Power Rangers. I know what they are in wrestling. But, like, what are some of the, like, the rights and wrongs for, like, Star Trek, like, fandom that would be, like, either like, all right, this is good, this is a no-no type of a deal. You know what I mean? Like, where do people stand on certain things?
It depends on who you ask.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, the Axanar thing's a really good opening up spot of, like, where people kind of stand on, and I get it a lot more now. But, like, because it's crazy, because we are doing Enterprise, and we talked about it last week. It wasn't the most highly received Star Trek show. So, and I think, Eric, you were saying this to me back when we did our Power Ranger team up live stream, is that, or maybe Josh, you may have said this, is that now people are going back and have a little bit more reverence for Enterprise than they did when it was airing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the same thing kind of happened with Deep Space Nine. Like you saw in the documentary that we watched, that people kind of felt like they were like the middle child that kind of got left out of everything. But now, like, that documentary is proof that people really enjoyed that series, and that its legacy is kind of starting to rebuild itself now.
Do you sometimes, Eric, get the eye roll if somebody is like, my favorite series is like TNG?
I mean, sometimes you're going to have that in all types of fandoms.
Sure.
I think TNG is a little bit more universally accepted. But I remember when Enterprise was airing. That's when the online community was really taken off, and it was around for a few years before that, like with Trek message boards and stuff. But there was a real division between older fans and younger fans. And when it came to Enterprise, a lot of the older fans thought that it was just stomping on all the continuity of the original series.
See, I figured that. I figured something like that was kind of like going to happen.
Well, and that happened again just recently with Discovery. And this is one of the things that I find so bizarre about fandom in general is the whole message of Star Trek is to be inclusive and to accept people for who they are, and embrace our differences instead of like pitting us against each other. But I mean, you see this with like stuff with like Marvel and Hasbro, and like even when we were talking about a female Red Ranger in Power Rangers, you see people like saying things like, "Oh, they're just making a female lead to further the SJW agenda." I'm like, have you not seen Star Trek before? Like, do you not understand what it is?
Always SJW. I mean, that's pretty much the whole philosophy of Star Trek. It's inclusive, progressive, and so it's wild. I mean, there's it's all come up again with Discovery and with even Picard. Like, as much as people love TNG, there's a lot of people out there that are saying Picard is too much like Discovery. It's too woke in a sense.
Well, I think a lot of people also.
That's so crazy that would be in Star Trek.
I don't know that it's a lot of people, but there's definitely a portion of the fandom that doesn't understand how entertainment progresses, and that when you make a show now in 2020, you're not going to make a show like a show that was in 1980.
Well,
You're
let me
going to make
ask
it
you
for
guys both a
new
question, and
sensibilities.
this is something that may have come up in the fandom. If it did, I don't know about it, but I'm just curious.
Sure.
Obviously, in Voyager, there was a female captain. Were people like not super cool with that?
You know, back in the
good.
day, I don't remember there being a lot of blowback for Voyager, at least not for the captain. I mean, people always question, the writing and certain choices of the quality of the show itself. But at the time, I don't remember there being like, oh my God, a female captain.
that's good.
What are we going to do?
Yeah,
that's great.
Well, I think also what you're seeing now is obviously, society right now is like everyone's kind of like on edge about everything. So I think you're seeing just people overreacting to things because the internet is an echo chamber. So they just keep seeing all these things that are kind of in their face.
Has there ever been even a talk of an alien captain, a full-time alien captain on a series? Just out of curiosity.
Well, they're kind of doing that with Discovery.
Yeah.
Even so, they're really setting up the character of Saru to kind of lead the ship.
Interesting.
And Saru is played by Doug Jones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't even know he was in Star Trek. That's crazy. All right, let's get into this because I like this episode a lot. Just right off the bat.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this one too. Like, it's interesting to me too. Going off a different direction again, slightly, is a lot of Trek shows had really shaky like first and second seasons.
Yes.
These two episodes that like Broken Bow and this one were really solid. I don't remember back when I was watching them the first time thinking that they were as good as I do now.
Yeah, honestly, for me, this episode, there's a lot of focus on the whole crew, kind of like you're seeing a little bit more deep dives of personalities. But I think this is the first time. Well, obviously, it is the first time where I felt like, oh, this is why I like Archer, because he's the dude that's going to go against like the grain and be like, yeah, fuck it, we're going to explore. Yeah, this is what we're here for.
Right.
I think that was like, to me, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm on board with this dude. Like, yes, I feel like we're going to get into a little trouble, but you know what? We're going to be all right for it. Like, so I think that with the tone that Archer sets for being the captain, as a fan, I'm willing to follow along. Now, I like the way they build up to Paul, though, because T'Pol in this episode is very hesitant about everything. Right. And I think that like the way that the characterization of her plays out, it makes you understand that character right away, if you hadn't already gotten it from the first episode. So I think that that's really cool. And I also like the fact that Hoshi gets a little shine in this too.
Yeah.
Because I think that certain characters in the very first season are underutilized. But I like when they do step up and get that spotlight, because when they do get the spotlight and it shines on them, they really deliver. And I think that this is what Hoshi did, at least for me in this episode.
Yeah, and this is a great episode, really, for Hoshi because, it's showing that Starfleet is still a young organization at this time. And there haven't been a lot of humans with a lot of experience like this, even though they train for it. And it's kind of funny to see a character who, doesn't have their space legs almost. And they are nervous and they can't sleep at night because they're facing the wrong side of the ship. It's little details like that make these characters more human.
Yes.
And this is a real episode that Hoshi shined in, and really great insight into her character very early on in the series.
And I also like the fact that in the captain's log, Archer, they set it up real quick that the person that's going to oppose Archer at every turn is going to be T'Pol. And I like the fact that he's kind of like, look, he's doing his captain's log and he's like, I didn't sign up. He says something to the fact of like, he didn't sign up for a mission with the Vulcan who was going to tow, who continuously sucks the air out of the room. I love this interaction because he's doing his best to be diplomatic, but he's just kind of like, this is not what I signed up for. I love it. I love it.
To me, it almost feels like the interaction between Archer and T'Pol is like what the interaction between Spock and Bones was.
Yeah, yeah.
Like not so much Kirk, because Kirk and Spock had their own thing, but Bones was always that guy like, why aren't you going to do something about this?
Yeah, I love that interaction. But see, also like and I don't know, Eric, do you think that at this point here they start, because Trip obviously he wants to go,
Yeah.
and he's very excited to go, but I think
Yes.
that in the beginning of this first season here, you start seeing a turn where I felt like they want to make Trip a pivotal point as like he's gaining more popularity, but by the time it was airing, Eric, was
Mhm.
Trip kind of like a character that fans kind of talked about being like, oh, I really like Trip?
Oh, I think he was. Well, I can't speak for a lot of fans, but it seemed like everyone really enjoyed him. I loved the character right from the get go because there was that feeling of like, oh, he's the good old Southern guy, kind of like Bones, and that's what they tried to replicate with Enterprise was that Kirk Spock McCoy dynamic with Enterprise,
Oh, that makes
and
a lot more sense now.
yeah. So they were trying to, it's Enterprise you can kind of see as like, hey, this is like Power Rangers perspective. It's, them trying to recapture the magic of the original series.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think just by how Connor Trinneer played him and just the character is just so likable that and there's a couple episodes this season in particular that really made Trip shine and just made him a fan favorite.
I think it's the next episode we do where it's they go to another planet and trip into Paul.
Oh yeah.
Eric, we got it. Can you do next week too? I want you on that episode.
Yeah, I could do it. Yeah, sure.
Sweet. But I want to dive into to Trip a little bit eventually because I think that like the character. See, it's interesting. When I was watching Enterprise and watching it, and the more I get to know Trip, he's a more likable version of Sawyer from Lost.
Okay.
I can see that.
And like just in tone and the way he does things, he's not as conniving as Sawyer, but he's a little bit more innocent like that. But he's definitely like when he takes a stand, right? And I think that Trip, the reason I like Trip so much is because he feels in some point in time like he's the everyman character. And I think that he's extremely relatable. That's why I like Trip. But in terms of, and he's a great companion piece for Jonathan Archer because it's like peanut butter and jelly. Those two, like you could tell that they've seen life together at least in some points, and I know we get there in the future. But they've seen a little bit of life together, and I think that that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But this episode in general, again, going back to what I was talking about before with it being a good continuation of setting up the series, it also sets up. It's a good indication of setting up what Starfleet is.
Yes,
because in the episode they come across the disabled Axanar ship, and T'Pol's like, no, we like this isn't our business. We don't know what happened here. We should just keep going and leave whatever happened here to be dealt with as with the people here that were involved. And Archer is like, all right, fine, but then changes his mind and is like, no, we have to go back. We have to help these people.
Yes, I love this.
Yes.
So the moral, like the morality of this show reminds me very much of great episodes I loved in Doctor Who, where there was always this kind of moral conundrum that they had to kind of figure out or go through, which I think, look, for the good or the bad, it's going to have an effect.
Right.
Like because at this point, you're at a fork in the road. What do you do?
Yeah.
And I think that he does the right thing. Even though sometimes it may be against protocol, I feel like Jonathan Archer makes the right call here.
Right, but also at this point in time, we also have to keep in mind there isn't necessarily
Exactly.
There's the protocol that the Vulcans want us to have, and that's the protocol that kept them away from launching the ship when they wanted to launch the ship, and from holding back on being able to go warp 5 or whatever it was. The Vulcans were very. This is how we did things.
Well, it's because they were very skeptical of even the warp 5 technology.
But not only that, they were like, we have to do everything in a logical fashion, and the logical way to do things is the way that we did things.
Right.
So they're trying to keep Earth into proceeding as they did.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the right thing for Earth to do.
Hey, Eric, I know that you're a second generation Star Trek fan. Just out of curiosity, what's your dad's Star Trek crew?
Oh wow. Uh, he actually really liked Enterprise because that was a show that we watched together, and it did make him nostalgic for the original series. So he really liked Next Generation as well. That was something that we also watched together, and Voyager too. I mean, he pretty much likes all the shows, but the original series is what he grew up with, and that was something that he always liked. And when I got to show him that, hey, they've done all of these episodes now remastered with like new graphics and all that stuff, that was on his Netflix really fast,
Nice.
and he got to revisit that series and those memories, but with updated graphics and
How cool.
the picture that's just the way that they clean that series up is just beautiful.
So in the documentary that Josh showed me, What We Left Behind, they've
Yes,
remastered some of the scenes from Deep Space Nine, I believe.
Yeah.
And
yes.
when we were watching it on Josh's like 70-inch TV, uh, I
Oh,
was I was blown away how good
It,
that stuff
it
looked.
it made me really really disappointed that we're not going to get the remaster
right.
for either Deep Space Nine or Voyager. I completely understand why, and I agree with the business decision behind it. But
Mhm.
as a fan, just looking at those scenes with the updated and the cleaned up visuals, it just looked so good.
Now,
Yeah, I got to see that documentary when it came out in theaters. I also backed it too. I was one of the backers, so I'm in the credits, which is pretty sweet.
hey, you know
Uh,
what? I was just thinking, that's awesome, by the way, but I was just thinking, I don't know if you remember this, but our old studio was at the Pacific Design Center.
Right.
What was that Star Trek thing that they were doing there? Remember they were doing a big Star
Oh
Trek
yeah,
thing there?
so fan sets. Who
oh,
so
okay.
so Star Trek recently, uh, or CBS, Viacom, whoever you want to call it, just kind of, I guess, upgraded their Star Trek franchise to this thing that they're now calling Star Trek Universe. So that was a I think I don't know if it was a press thing or if it was for like the studio people and industry people to kind of show off some of the new things that they were bringing out for this new thing that they're doing.
Interesting. So the Axanar, why are they important, Josh? Why are they important in this episode?
Hold on a second. I will let Eric discuss that while I fix his video here.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
you did something there. Eric, why are the
Yeah.
Axanar important in this episode, sir?
So first off, we're because really the first, kind of first contact situation opportunity that the NX-01 has and that Archer has. And it's really the first mystery that they need to solve. And the reason why they're so important in this episode is also because they need to establish how to communicate with the various alien races out there. And so for Hoshi to kind of get her space legs and for her to get this confident boost so early on in the series just helps their mission progress further down the line because, like she said in the episode, there's going to be planets that they come to that might have hundreds of languages. And Jonathan Archer is going to need her to do that job. And it's a really important point. And to go back to something we were talking about earlier, Enterprise, now that they're deep in space, deeper than any other human vessel has gone before, they're the ones that are inventing these protocols. They're the ones that are going out there and inventing the procedures that they need to do and testing out the new equipment that they have.
Now, in past Star Trek series or previous Star Trek series, I should say, is there a communications officer like a Hoshi on every ship?
Um, no, I mean, in the original series, Uhura was definitely like the dedicated communications officer.
Right, like you saw, she
Um,
had the earpiece.
Right.
but in future series that's not like just one job that someone has. It's
Gotcha.
kind of folded into other duties.
Okay.
Well, in the future, I mean, this is jumping way ahead to TNG. But the Universal Translator at come Next Generation was good enough that it could translate most languages that they read.
So this is pretty cool too that I'm starting to explore with Star Trek as well. Is
Mhm.
that not only are you seeing how things started, but you're seeing an evolution of some of the things that they're using. Like
Yes.
like for example, like the phasers, right? Like the
Mhm.
phasers have more of the design that people are familiar with from the original series, and you could tell that even then they're like still hesitant on the stun setting and like the
Right.
lethal
Yeah,
setting.
yeah.
And then when you get to Star Trek, the phasers completely redesigned, and it feels like or Star Trek. When you get to Next Generation, it's a little bit it's redesigned to look more like a remote control, but it's also you can see the technology in the universe is kind of advanced a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah, well, in TNG, like there were multiple different versions of the phaser too. Like there was the little one that looked like the remote control, but then there was the bigger one that looked more like what you come to know as a ray gun. That was more of a handheld thing.
Now-
And then they had the rifles.
Stank Boy
Yeah.
has a great comment in the chat. He says Hoshi basically got replaced by the Universal Translator.
Right.
LOL.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, not untrue.
Yeah. No. And
She basically invented herself out of a job. That's
Yes,
what.
right. And well, and you saw her on the ship. Working with that, where she's like, yeah, it's kind of like I was talking with some of the guys from Artificial a couple of weeks ago about different technology and everything, and now how with Alexa or Google Google Home or whatever it is, or Siri, you can connect it to your car, and I find myself in my car yelling at Google to like play something for me on Spotify. And it has it goes in and plays something completely different. I'm like, no, that's not what I said. So when Hoshi was standing there with the device and she's like, ship, like I completely relate to what was going on and that how she was trying to get it to recognize.
But
what
I
was
I
happening.
think that's the charm of Enterprise, though, is the
Yes.
relatability of the characters don't feel like a far stretch for me as a new fan.
Right.
They feel like obviously, like I'm not gonna go on a spaceship and like, I mean, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but me in the situation, I feel like they present it in a way that's not so I can suspend my disbelief enough to be like, yeah,
Mhm.
like it's very relatable. Like I feel like in this episode is it's written by Brian Braga,
Brandon Braga.
Brendan Braga, and let's see,
Rick Berman.
yes, and Rick Berman. So you can kind of tell that of what they want to do with the characters right off the bat, and I feel like, and like maybe it's just me being a brand new, fresh-eyed fan. I feel like they really understand the franchise and how specific crew members can work together in terms of like character tropes. Like I feel like they understand the characters well enough to get the tropes of like what each person kind of needs to be. And I think they do a really successful job of writing the characters and fleshing them out. However, like I said, is that in the first season, at least from my experience, I wish a little bit more they focused in on some of the other characters just a little bit more. Like I feel like Travis only gets one episode a season, but they're always episodes I love.
Right.
Travis Mayweather is one of the best underrated characters in the whole series.
And that's actually an interesting thing to me too, because we were talking about this before with seasons now being 13 or 16 episodes or less. Back then you had 22 episodes. So even though there were like 4 or 5 people on the main ensemble, there's no reason that they each couldn't have had at least 2 episodes a season.
Right.
Now, Eric, when you were watching back this episode 2 of Enterprise, did you? I'm assuming you watched this live also when this episode aired.
Yes.
You did. What were some of the immediate memories that jumped out at you immediately from like watching it, taking you back from that nostalgia kick?
Yeah, I think when I first watched this, I was in my second year of college, and I forgot. I think Enterprise aired like on Wednesdays when it first came out.
That sounds right.
And so Wednesdays were always like my Star Trek night, and so it's like put away the college assignments, sit down and enjoy Star Trek. And Enterprise was just so new and fresh. I was just glued to the screen because what this episode does in particular, and it's subtle, but not only are they exploring Hoshi's character, but they're also exploring the character of the ship.
Yes.
And The NX-01, hands down, is one of my favorite Star Trek ships, and it's because
Me too.
they were focused so much on like the technology and how everything worked and it fit together. Those sets are beautiful because they're also functional. And I love it when they're trying to like dial in the torpedoes and the comment of 3 meters could be the difference between blowing up an access port or blowing up their warp drive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. And Reed is such a awesome character. There's an episode this season I really love. It's probably one of my favorite, like top 10 Star Trek episodes, called Silent Enemy, and that's when they have to get the phasers working. And
Oh yes, I love this episode.
I don't remember that one.
I'm such a like tech head for this kind of stuff. One of the things I love most about Star Trek is this future technology, and we got to find out more about the Enterprise in Enterprise than probably any other ship in Star Trek. And I just love when they're access tubes and they have the phasers, and you see the phaser and it comes out of the port right where you expect it to on the ship, and so the CGI model matches the sets, and it's fantastic. Even in this episode, when they're reconnecting back to the ship from the shuttle pod, and the enemy fire's blowing up, and it's shaking, and you even got Hoshi, the little detail of her pulling up the blast shield, just so she doesn't have to look at that. It's awesome.
That's actually a great point that I never even realized how much the ship is a character in Enterprise. Because like you said, Eric, there's also another episode too where it's later on down the line, but it's where the Ferengi are like stealing everything and knock everybody out, and how much like about I've obviously I've never stepped foot on the Enterprise,
right.
But I know in my head like where certain things are and where they're hiding certain things or like where the characters are going, because they do such a good job of laying out the ship for you. I agree with that. I hadn't even thought about that, but like the actual ship itself is a character, which I never really talked about.
Let me actually follow up on that idea a little bit, because that was also a huge debate among Star Trek fans when Discovery came out. Is that and first it happened in Enterprise, where technology in the year that Enterprise would have happened would have theoretically looked even more ancient than technology did in the original series because of the difference in time. How did you feel, Eric, and I guess this would be a question for you as well, Joe, about the technology being aesthetically updated to make it look more modern versus sticking with something that will have looked older because that's what was set with the original series?
So there's two schools of thought that I have about this. I don't want to spoil anything for Joe, but there is an episode of Enterprise in the 4th season, which recreates a certain classic ship with the classic look, but with Enterprise being fully HD, it still looks gorgeous. So part of me is like, you can still achieve that classic look, that simplified look of Starfleet in an HD setting. But I also understand that this is, the 21st century, and we've got, great CGI effects and great sets that can be made. So you don't want to be looking at blank cardboard walls with orange and green tubes all over the place. I think Discovery did enough of a balance where they updated the look to kind of be that retro futuristic, to match the aesthetic of the original series. And that was further emphasized in the 2nd season of Discovery, when you've got Pike and the Enterprise and all of that. My only gripe, and this is so nerdy, is that they do some shots like inside the ship of like the
turbo lifts,
and the whole ship is just like this empty TARDIS cavern, and I'm like, this would have never happened in like TNG or DS9, because they had so many people that were like on the technical staff and set designers, where they had blueprints of the station. There's no like empty voids in a ship. That's stupid. So there's parts of me where I'm like, I don't think the visual effects people that they have working on the current show, they're great. But when it comes to like some of the ship inside stuff, I don't need to see an empty cavern of like tubes and empty space.
No, I completely agree. Yeah. Like my whole thing with it was like, you watch Next Generation and they had the pads that they would walk around with, which were essentially iPads or Android tablets or whatever. And they for the 80s they did a good job of imagining what that would look like in the future. But my cell phone here looks so much more advanced than anything that they had on Next Generation, that when Discovery started, I was like, okay, no, this makes sense to make things look updated, because why would I want to look at like this tricorder device that has a monochrome readout that looks like a TI-92 calculator?
So for me, it's a little different, and I feel that like maybe it's because I can suspend my disbelief in terms of technology, but I also look at it in a very different manner. For example, like maybe 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, like I remember having like a Trio cell phone with like a Palm Pilot and shit, the stylus. So like I knew that like that was the hot technology at the time, even though it felt like I was kind of regressing from being a small ass flip phone that was like a Razor, right?
Right.
But it felt like I had more power. So I wasn't necessarily, I don't have a problem with like any of the looks of like the technology, because also I also do know that the original series was shot in the 60s. So I kind of get it. Like I'm more so on board with all the aesthetics, because I can suspend the disbelief enough. It's really when it comes down to, am I paying attention to that too much, or the storytelling? Right. No, and if I am paying attention to that too much, then they're not doing a great job of storytellers, which I never had a problem with, really.
Right. Well, I completely understand that. But also on the other end, this is what nerds do.
Sure.
Like,
but
so those discussions are absolutely
There's a great comment which I never knew, but from Stank Boy, and I would love to get your guys' comment on this, because this is a great one. Dominic Keating said he played Reed as a gay man. Y'all should see if you can pick up on this and you rewatch series. The writers tried to fight to make him attracted to T'Pol. And I do know that that's a thing, but I did not know that he played him as a gay man. I didn't know that either. I didn't know that. But Eric, is that something that you had known, or back when you were watching it, or even knew now?
I really didn't catch up on that or catch on that when I was originally watching it back in the early 2000s. I mean, he's British, and he's just kind of like the everyman too, in a way that Trip is, but more reserved and just polite and British. And I mean, I never really got that from Reed. How the actor portrays him versus how the writers want him to be are quite different. So. But overall, I like Reed as a character, and the episode with him and Trip in the shuttle pod, dude, that's another great episode.
Oh my gosh, there's a moment in that episode where Trip is going up the up these like ladder, and like he's like, stand down, don't do it, don't go up to die, like, or I'm gonna shoot you. And he's like, you're gonna shoot me? We're already gonna be dead. It's a phenomenal episode, like no joke. And then like. That episode's great. I actually love all the stuff when they put Trip and Reed in these certain situations, because I feel like Eric said, they both are the everyman, but they both handle things in a very different way. Those characters are very opposite in a lot of ways, but you could tell why they're friends, though, because they butt heads, but they're always like in this together. I love seeing the two of them on screen together because the chemistry. But a person that I love seeing on screen too all the time is Flux. Character's great.
Oh yeah,
I love seeing John Billingsley portray that character.
So sorry to cut you off. In this episode, with Flux examining the Axanar bodies and figuring out what's going on, what would you have done in that situation? What would you have done the Archer thing and gone back and been like, okay, no, we have to help these people, or we don't have this technology to stand up to these guys, we should split?
It's a hard question, because at that point you're talking moral conundrum, right? Because if there's not a guide on how to do the job, you got to figure it out on the fly.
Right.
Me personally, I probably would have went back and helped, because at the very end of the day, you know this about me, is like I hate leaving things unsettled. Like I need to figure out what it is I'm trying to accomplish in order for me to even if I don't get it done.
Right.
In order for me to feel like I've exhausted all my efforts, there's nothing more I can do. So I probably would have. And honestly, probably the same way Jonathan Archer did. And this is why I do like the character so much, is because it's an idealistic version of who I would want to be if I was a captain also. Because I think that Jonathan Archer is the type of person I would want to be. Not necessarily saying I would be, but he's the kind of person I would want to be. For the rights and the wrongs, though. Because I do think that if he's on a mission for exploration, he's exploring it to the best of his ability, even sometimes going against that grain, which we kind of talked about. But I would have went back. I think I would have, even though it probably wouldn't have been the smartest idea. And even though they get the forewarning of like, listen, the reason why these aliens have this issue is because there's a
they produce the triglobulin
triglobulin,
which is similar to the chemical that's put out by human lymph nodes as well.
Right. So I mean, knowing that information, I'd have probably been a little bit more hesitant, but I definitely would have done it. I think it would have been cool. But yeah, I think this series, honestly, this episode in particular, is a great gateway to get you to understand where this crew is going to be going and some of the challenges they're going to be facing,
like what they've decided their purpose,
right? And I like that. I like also figuring that out,
because that's always a big thing to me too with Star Trek or with like other space exploration shows in general. Is okay, so we've got Starfleet that's gone out there, and they've just kind of like in the future they've just kind of decided, okay, we're policing the galaxy, like we're going to make sure that things that everyone's being treated fairly, and if we don't feel that someone's doing something the right way, we're going to step in, and we're going to kind of make sure that they do.
Eric, sorry, go ahead, Josh. I know you.
No. So all I was going to say is there's two sides to that. There's okay, we have to do this because this is the right thing to do, which is where Archer came in. But then there's kind of the whole side of it, where it's, well, who put us in charge? Why is it our responsibility to do this?
So my question is to Eric: when did Axanar the fan film start again?
14. They started I think it was 2012 when they first announced it, and then 2014 when they started doing all the fundraising stuff.
So now when you hear the reference to the Axanar in this episode, do you kind of get this kind of like twitch in the back of your mind being, God damn it, like they screwed me on this one?
No, not really, because first and foremost, I love the Star Trek property, sure. And when it comes to Star Trek and just the philosophies and all that stuff, did I get screwed over by this guy and his fan film, and people got screwed out of their money or whatever? Sure. But at the end of the day, it's I still love Star Trek, and the only reason I supported a fan film like that was because I thought we were going to get another cool look into the Star Trek universe. I don't care if it's a fan film, if it's an official product, if it's the books or whatever. I just love the universe of Star Trek, and any opportunity I get a chance to dive into that universe, whether officially or unofficially, I'll take that chance.
Hey, are the Star Trek shorts? I saw those on Amazon. Some called Star Trek shorts. Are those
short treks?
Short treks. Are those like canon? Or are they just like
they're canon? They started with Discovery. Yes. So they take place in between seasons of Discovery, and then
they're not fan films. Those are
right.
produced.
No, that's official.
Yeah, all the short treks are all official Star Trek canon. The right now there's one that ties into, or one or two that tie into Picard, but all the rest are tying into what was happening on.
Yeah, there was the last short trek that they did was the one that tied into Picard. But all the other short treks, I mean, they're collected now onto a Blu-ray collection that came out a month or two ago.
Oh, so but they're digestible, smaller.
Yes.
Yeah. But I wouldn't recommend watching them until you're caught up with Discovery.
Okay.
Because you won't necessarily understand who the characters are.
You know what the hardest thing about this whole thing has been is not like making sure that I don't jump ahead.
Right.
It's been very hard because
Right.
I honestly have wanted to jump. I was gonna jump to Deep Space Nine next, but then I was like, nah, man, stay your course. Stay your course.
So let me ask you a question then, because this is interesting. Actually, before I ask you this, I want to follow up with Eric about the whole Axanar thing. So
Yeah.
when at the end of the episode, when they mentioned the name and they were like, oh, they call themselves the Axanar, did that ring a bell? Like versus, I don't know when you originally watched the show, but when you originally watched the show, did you recognize the name Axanar?
Yeah, when I watched Enterprise, I was watching it as they aired. So 2001, yeah, I watched this, and I remembered the mentions of Axanar from I think it's Who the Gods Destroy or whatever
Sounds
from
right.
the original series.
Yeah.
So I remember that mention, and then to have Jonathan Archer casually go, "Hey, well, we met these people, and they're the Axanar." Like even originally watching it, I was like, "Oh wow, we finally got to see a species that was mentioned before, but we never got."
Right, because for me it was almost the same thing, because like I said, I never watched it when it was originally on. I not rewatched it, but I watched it when I was working at the cable company. Like I had it on in the background while I was taking phone calls for like trying to help people set up their DVRs and shit. But then this time around watching it, and I heard the name Axanar, I was like, wait, I know that name. Why do I know that name? So immediately
Yeah.
even though there were only like 3 or 4 minutes left in the episode, if that, I paused it, turned to my laptop. I was like, okay, who are the Axanar and why do I know that name? Which led me down the rabbit hole of the fan film and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of leads me to a question, not necessarily a question, but more of an observation, is that as we watch these shows, there's things that are going to pop out to me and to Eric and
Right.
to other people who are familiar with the series as a whole, and you're just going to be watching it and you're going to be like, oh, that's cool. Like with the Axanar.
So I was actually,
I feel like that's the thing where you're just like, oh, okay, cool, that's their name.
yeah. So I was actually going to ask Eric a very similar question. So the
Sure.
question I was going to ask is that this is the first Star Trek show to not take place in a timeline after its predecessor.
Right.
Right.
So for you, or maybe even for fandom, I should say, was this looked at as like almost like a vehicle for being like, I wonder if they're going to use the gimmick of being like, oh, here's the thing that we never tied up, or maybe you might recognize. Was that like a big speculation of like, okay, because like in our Power Ranger stuff, right? We watch Beast Morphers. There's great Easter eggs for longtime fans that pay off.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Was it like that for you watching it back then, being like, I wonder if we're gonna figure out more of the universe that they've only talked about that we're going to see in this show? Was it kind of touted that way?
In a way, like when they first did the promotions and stuff, I remember the series finale, watching the series finale of Voyager, and right after the credits rolled, they had like, it was just text like flying by on the screen, but kind of hyping people up for Enterprise this fall, and it was like 150 years before Kirk and Spock, and people were like, oh crap, it's a prequel, like, oh my gosh. But watching the show, yeah, I was expecting that. I was expecting, as a prequel, show me some connections to stuff. I don't know how it's going to happen, but show it to me. And I remember when whatever episode was before the Andorian incident, and they're like, next time on Enterprise, and I saw the Andorians. Andorians have been like one of my favorite alien species. I love them in the original series. I played one for years in a Star Trek play-by-email simulation, like
get out of here,
in the late 90s. Yeah. And so we never got a lot of official stuff for Andorians. And when Enterprise was like, oh yeah, we're bringing back the Andorians, as a fan, I was losing my mind, because I'm like, finally we get to see these original series aliens like redone, and the Andorians were one of the original founders of the Federation. So when I heard Enterprise was doing that, I was losing my mind, because as a fan, I'm like, we finally get more information on these alien species that they were either in the original series or they were just never shown again.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So as a fan, I was just absolutely blown away by Enterprise.
For me, that was in Discovery when we found out that Pike was going to be the captain in season 2. Like this is stuff that you know already.
All right.
We find out that Pike is
Yes.
is coming in, and just like all the possibilities of what we could see with him, I was just like, this is going to be great. Like I know a lot of people were like shitting all over the fact that it was going to break canon and
Right.
they're changing things that they already know. But for me, it's like we were talking about last week, Star Trek has never canon has never been something that Star Trek has ever really cared about on a deep level.
See,
continuity has always been up in the air.
I think for me, I think I have a very different. I think I have a very different outlook than most Star Trek fans do,
Mhm.
and what I mean is that like it's so crazy to think about this, but like to me, the first crew of the Enterprise is this crew.
Right.
So like,
Yeah.
I don't even mean like just like in nostalgia wise, but like to me, this is like the genesis of it, right? So like I think that like when I think about Star Trek, I used to have this kind of preconceived notion that it was like your very stereotypical sci-fi show. Like to me, it
Mhm.
was what sci-fi the whole trope of sci-fi was.
Like
I
all
always thought it
technobabble
was Star
and
Trek,
just-
right?
Yeah.
But now my eyes are very much open to the fact of like Star Trek, especially now, the episodes I've been
Yes.
watching. Star Trek doesn't really matter like what era it takes place in. Even some of the best episodes are stuff that have nothing to do with the space exploration whatsoever.
Exactly.
And it's such a great character-driven show, which I never gave it the credit for, because I honestly thought that it was just living on the just being a good sci-fi trope show.
Right.
How wrong I was, because if like giving it an honest, fair chance, you realize how much you actually care about the characters. Like I said, I don't know how, and I've been very, very careful about like getting into any kind of spoilers about this show. So I'll watch YouTube because I've been watching a few like YouTube documentaries about Star Trek in general, and like things about Enterprise will come up, and like I saw one that was kind of like, did Jonathan Archer commit genocide? I was like, nope, can't watch this. Like I was like, nope, like I gotta stay away from that. So it's like, man, it's a minefield. But honestly, it's to the point where I honestly don't know if they're all going to make it out of the season.
Right. So my question for you that I was going to come back to before, because you're probably going to finish Enterprise in the next like week or so.
Yeah, I've been slowing it down to savor it a little bit more.
Right. But so when Enterprise is finished, are you going to take a break from Star Trek, or you're going to jump right into Discovery?
So I have this weird thing about me where if I finish something, for example, I've been doing a Power Ranger rewatch too, and I just finished Zeo. I have to watch the next like parts of the next season, like the first few episodes, just to see if the connection's there, if it feels like it makes sense to me. So I'll do the same thing. Like as soon as I finish Enterprise, I guarantee you I'm gonna watch The Cage right after, because I want that storytelling to continue on, and it's almost kind of like.
Oh, so you're gonna watch the actual pilot. You're gonna watch The Cage and then go into Discovery.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am, because I feel that like I want to get my best experience with Star Trek being chronological as I can.
That's gonna be interesting, because
it is. It's gonna be really interesting.
That like without spoiling anything at all, that comes back when Pike comes onto Discovery, like the whole thing with The Cage. So I'm interested to see how you react to that.
I'm interested too, because. Like I said, man, it's such a character-driven show that if I can get attached to the characters, I really don't care about like it could be anywhere. Like when you showed me that Deep Space Nine episode, I could care less about what Cisco was going through in his times of trouble. What I cared about is that dude that was on Earth that was making that goddamn story.
Right.
A black dude on Earth that was just making a story. That's what I cared about.
And it's like that episode, like I obviously that us discussing that episode is like 4 years away, but that's one of those episodes that I just love.
But look, honestly, there's episodes in Enterprise that are very much like that.
Yeah.
That harken so close to home, and you wouldn't think they do. Like there's a great episode about, and I'm sure Eric, you remember this one, where Archer and Tucker or Trip, they're in a Suliban prison. And essentially, these Sulibans didn't even really do anything wrong. they were just there almost in this like weird Suliban concentration camp. And
Yep.
Archer's like, fuck this, man. Like, I'm breaking all these dudes out. And like, and you see Reed come in the full makeup and he helps them. And then it leads to, well, some of the Suliban you let free ended up like becoming like fucking terrorists. And in that,
Yep.
it becomes like a thing.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Well,
dude, mind blown.
now here's the thing. Enterprise premiered, and it was like 2 weeks after 9/11.
I didn't
And
know
I
that.
and I remember,
Oh my God,
I
an attack on Earth? I did not know that.
yeah, so everything 9/11 shaped Enterprise big time. The whole season 3, let's go after these terrorists, totally because of like everything going on in the early 2000s.
Oh,
And
wow.
I remember when I watched the premiere of Enterprise, there was like Scott Bakula in full uniform addressing the audience in like this little commercial right before the show. You know, please support the Red Cross during this time. You know, they need your help because of 9/11.
Yeah.
And so 9/11 and everything surrounding that definitely shaped how Enterprise developed as a television show.
Man, now that you say that, that makes so much more sense.
Because Star Trek always does best when it's doing social commentary of the time.
Absolutely.
I didn't even connect those dots, but now that makes so much sense on where I'm at now and why they're going after
Yep.
Earth gets attacked. The one thing that we talked about earlier was that the reason I do love this show is they do such a great job of character building, but a lot of the shows are standalone episodes. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
a lot, especially in this first season. When you get to season 3, it changes dramatically. Like to the fact it's very episodic in terms of like you're going to like the next episode is going like, for example, when they're trying to find what are they called again? The
Xindi.
the Xindi. When they're trying to find the weapon the Xindi created, and they're like, all right, we got this dude. Oh my God, I just saw a great episode the other day too, where it was like they had Jonathan Archer, the fucking Jonathan Archer got a Xindi, and he was like, man, I was in prison with you, and they're on this ship back, and he's like, I don't remember any of this. And then it's really a scam by Jonathan Archer to get more information about the Xindi weapon.
I love episodes like that.
And I was like,
been,
dang.
What was it that I watched recently?
But it makes sense. When they're going after
They're-
the Xindi,
yeah.
it makes sense now that they're trying to stop this weapon of mass destruction from getting out. I would have never put that together.
There was an episode of MacGyver where they did something very similar, where they threw MacGyver and this other guy into a cell together and tried to make the guy believe that he had been there for like 3 weeks, even though he'd only been there for a couple of days. And Mission Impossible Fallout, which I rewatched a few weeks ago, with the terrorist guy, where they put him in the room and made him believe that he had been in a coma for 2 weeks, but it was really just this.
Yeah.
Dude,
this thing.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that because that makes so much more sense for. I get it now. Now watching season 3, I was just like, oh man, they really do a shift here,
Yeah.
and it becomes more action oriented.
But
And Deep Space Nine set that style of storytelling when they were doing the Dominion War arc.
Yeah.
The show went from episodic to heavily serialized. And Enterprise seasons 3 and 4 did the best of what Deep Space Nine did. Like, they did a great job of balancing standalone episodes with the overarching story theme.
A similar thing also in Deep Space Nine, other than Far Beyond the Stars, one of my favorite arcs was the Bell Riot.
Yes.
Which is something you'll get to it eventually, but it was another very social commentary heavy episode.
But I was just talking about this a few weeks ago on Twitter about that very episode, because when we had all the, Black Lives Matter riots and everything going on, and that episode in particular, that episode is like 2025, and people are living in like district slums that the government put them in. And it's like, holy crap, this episode that was produced like 15 years ago or 20 years ago is talking about stuff that's happening like right now.
Yeah.
So crazy.
And that's the power of Star Trek. It's universal because they tackle these social commentary themes that still persist today.
Hey, how did the rivalry between Star Trek and Star Wars even become a thing? Because those are two very different properties.
I don't know. I
don't
think that's
really
a more
know.
fan-driven.
Yeah, it's
thing.
like Marvel versus DC.
But even then, I mean, Marvel and DC, they're both superheroes. The only thing that Star Trek and Star Wars even have close in common
Space.
is they both take place in space.
Yeah.
Everything else is very different. Like
Mhm.
everything else is
Yeah.
very different.
Yeah, the type of shows that they are completely polar opposites.
By the way, I think the next episode I'm at, I don't know if it's yet because I think it was Eric that said in the chat last week that it was like there's going to be a Phlox episode that you're going to love because you like the character. I think that's the next episode that I'm on next.
Nice.
Where he like takes over the ship or something. I read the
Yeah.
description and I was
don't know
like,
if I
oh,
remember that
okay,
one either.
I think this is that episode. I love his stuff. But see, here's the thing. Here's the thing I love about this episode in particular. Excuse me, is that when you see a character that shines on a show, they really put the spotlight on that character. In this particular episode, you really do see big shines on T'Pol, Archer, and Hoshi. It's unfortunate that we don't get more Hoshi follow-up, but it's okay because I feel like we're so early on here where you're still exploring the characters and you're still exploring the characteristics of everybody. I feel that like one thing the Enterprise has done a really good job at is staying true to who the characters are. There's only one character that goes through somewhat of a small shift that's a little different, but you can kind of see it, is in season 3 with T'Pol.
Yes.
I felt like in season 3 with T'Pol, they write her slightly differently to be a little bit more likable. But here, where we're still exploring all the characters, you're starting to understand who they are, and I feel that like they stay true to it for most of the majority of the time on the series. Which is a really good nod to
something that I think Star Trek has been very good with is I mean, you know what a series Bible is.
Yeah.
So like they're fairly consistent with their with their characterizations of people. Like I feel like they have where they want the characters to go very detailed in those in that series Bible, and everyone does a fairly good job at staying with what they had in mind originally.
Eric, when you were there watching Enterprise week to week, because honestly, another thing that I kind of discovered going along watching Enterprise the way I have, I've just binged it.
Right.
To me, it's a very bingeable show, though. Which is surprising because I wouldn't have expected that from Star Trek, because they're 44-minute long episodes,
right.
So it just feels like that wouldn't be the thing. But when you were watching it week to week, because for the majority of the time they do wrap up the episode in that 44-minute time span. But when you were watching it week to week, did you have an urge to be like, damn it, I want to see like what's going to happen next week with the crew? Or would that fulfill you for your week being like, all right, cool, I got another episode next week type?
It was a little bit of both because that was back in the day when they still did like episode previews for the next week. I mean, not a lot of modern television does that anymore. And Star Trek always did a really good job of like, hey, next week, here's this 30-second tease. And there would be some episodes where I was like, I really want to watch that right now. But for the most part, yeah, like I got my fill of Star Trek for the week and I was good. But that's because, you know, at the time, the past 15, 17 years, it was like we were getting a new Star Trek episode, you know, every week, take a summer break and start it all over again. So we were used to that. It's only when you get Enterprise canceled and then you go for a drought for 4 years and then it's like, hey, J.J. Abrams movie. I'm like, oh, Star Trek's back. Like that's what it was. You don't miss it until it's really gone.
Now, with you watching Enterprise the way you did, what were the characters, like at this point, what were the characters that you wanted to see on the next episode get like a focus or get a little bit of shine on?
At the time I was really interested in Mayweather because his story that they set up in Broken Bow is the most fascinating to me.
I agree.
He's already been out there. He's already been out there for years. And he has a different perspective as someone who's on like a generational family cargo ship. And now he broke away from that to join Starfleet. and explore the galaxy even further. And I really wish that they leaned more into his expertise as, hey, I've already been out here. And so early on, I was like, oh man, when are we going to get a Travis episode? Like, when are we gonna see his parent ship? Are we gonna meet up with them at some
I thought
point?
the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm happy we do get the episode where that happens, though. Because
yes.
the one thing I will say about Enterprise is that, at least from where I'm at right now, everything that they kind of set up, they do pay off. And I think that, like, that's one of the things, like, at least now, nothing's really dangling. Nothing feels like it's, like, misplaced or handled poorly. Like, I feel like they knew the story they wanted to tell and always went into the direction to tell that story. I do think the show's very tight in terms of, like, and granted, at this point, they've had such a long experience with Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, so they had it.
Right.
But you could tell that they were running a pretty, well, no pun intended, tight ship in order to make sure that the story was very cohesive in terms of storytelling.
Yes. Right.
Which I thought was very good. Now, with this episode too, we do get a crewman that dies, right? Or am I wrong?
Do we?
After helping them recover. No. I'm sorry.
Not this
I'm
one.
sorry. They have a. I'm sorry. I confused that for a second on these notes. There was a dead crewman on the other ship.
Yes.
Which was that moral conundrum. Now, what would you have done?
Man, now you're turning it back on me. I probably also would have helped. Because for me, that's the whole purpose of exploring and getting out there, is to make new friends and to find allies to join us in our exploration of the galaxy. Is at that point in time, obviously they didn't know that Starfleet was going to emerge to be this huge United Nations of the Alpha and Beta quadrants or whatever. But for me, it's a moral imperative. It's like, okay, we can help these people. And sure, it might not be the wisest move, but it's still the right move.
Now, Eric, what would you have done?
I would have helped them. I would have done the same thing that Archer did. And the reason I say that is because look at Archer in this episode. They're having dinner. He can barely eat because it's chewing away at him in his mind. He's like, we got to go back. We can't just do nothing. And he makes a great point in the episode, like, that's the human condition. We're out here to help each other. And, sure, the Vulcans can have that emotional detachment, but, humans have their own code of honor and our own moral code. And I would have to help. I would definitely have to help.
I think that the closing Starlog that Jonathan Archer gives is such a great segue into, like, what you're going to explore with the whole series, essentially. So he says, Captain Starlog, May 6, 2151. After helping them recover their dead crewmen, we had a chance to spend some time with the Axanar. Turns out they're androgynous and live over 400 years. I look forward to meeting them again under better circumstances. Before we resume our course, I have agreed to make a brief detour, which to me is kind of important for a couple of reasons. Number one, I feel that, like, now knowing
slug. We haven't even talked about the slug.
We haven't even talked about the slug. That's true. That's right. We get to another planet with Hoshi's slug, right? But the one thing that I find important about this is that usually in Star Trek or any kind of militaristic type of thing, or even exploration type of thing, there is a course that you set in order to get point A to point B in a timely manner.
Yep.
I think Jonathan Archer here is kind of like, he's a little bit more of a starjammer, essentially. He's kind of like going to take detours to figure out where we go next.
Right.
I feel he's a good mix between Picard and not knowing Picard that well as an adult, because I haven't revisited that character,
right.
But a little bit of Picard and Kirk kind of mixed into one.
Yes.
Where it's a little interesting. Now, another thing that is kind of fascinating is, let's talk about that slug real quick, because that actually opens up the door to, like, a bigger conversation. That's how we even start the episode, is with this damn slug.
And Phlox wanting to feed it to his bat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that also establishes Phlox. I mean, we know that he has this cryptozoology kind of like fascination because it establishes that very early on. But we also see Hoshi's compassion about why the slug isn't necessarily even moving, right? And she essentially wants to make sure that it's alive, essentially.
Right. But I think also that's her being like, this is my fault. I took the slug off the planet, so it's my responsibility to make sure that it survives.
Which is a big part of this. Now, I want to talk about the reception real quick. This episode achieved the Nelson rating of a 5.7 and was watched by a total of 9.18 million viewers.
Okay.
Just to put in that in perspective, that's a huge audience for nowadays.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people aren't watching live TV like that.
For nowadays, but back then it was like, it's all right.
I know, it's kind of crazy.
And the fact that, like, you see the ratings of what Enterprise got canceled at, any show today would love those kind of ratings. So it's
absolutely. So let me ask you a question. In your notes there, do you have the ratings for the premiere?
I do
for the series.
The premiere was huge.
Yeah, was it? I'm interested in what the fall off was from the premiere to episode 2.
Yes, keep talking and give me a second. I will pull that up though.
Sluggo, which is something that I actually found interesting with the name, and I haven't gone and looked this up. But isn't Sluggo the name of the drink product?
Yes.
From the J.J. Abrams verse?
Yes. Which he probably took from this, yeah.
I saw that. I heard the name. I was like, why does that sound so familiar? And then I was thinking about Cloverfield. I was like, wait a second.
Oh, yeah. Wait, where were...
Or was that Slusho?
Okay. So the network premiere, I found it, Joe.
Yes, I just saw it too.
This achieved a Nielsen rating of 7.0 and was watched by 12.54 million viewers.
It's crazy.
So it was about a 3 million person drop off, which in the when you think about like series premieres, series finales, that's not bad.
No, it's not. If you look at so this is a wrestling thing, both you guys may not even care. But just when WWE debuted SmackDown, it had this is gonna sound crazy because now I think it only achieved like 2 million viewers, but to them that was a huge success.
Right.
The drop off 500,000 it was the second week.
Oh wow,
or something like that. It was insane.
But I guess that's interesting though because proportionately that's a much bigger drop off.
Huge.
You're right.
But still it was something like that, like 800,000, 500,000. It was something very low like that. But it was almost them trying to figure that out. But that's just shows that like we're in such a different era.
Right.
Which actually, I had another question for both of you actually.
Sure.
So I know Eric watched week to week Enterprise. Now with Discovery, does it air?
It's week to week.
It's week to week, so it doesn't all come out just at once. Then.
Right.
Okay. So it's not like these modern shows like
CBS All Access is still trying to mimic the network TV model where they're releasing everything week to week.
Does it work for you guys?
Yes and no. I'm going to say yes because it helps prevent me from sitting there and watching the entire series in one shot. And it's like, okay, this episode is done. Now I'm going to go and do other stuff now. Versus other shows where I'm like, I have the entire thing here. Why am I going to go and do something else when I can just sit here and watch it? But on the other hand, it's the same thing you were talking about before. It's like at the end of the episode, I'm like, oh, I want to know what happens next, and it's a little bit of just wanting like not being able to watch it. That's like,
well, I mean,
had it all.
For me,
for as a Star Trek viewer, I'm nostalgic for that. So when Discovery's going week to week and they've got the teaser next time on Discovery, I'm nostalgic for it because I'm like, well, I'm used to this as a Star Trek fan. I know what this is like, and it's great when you're a Star Trek content creator because you're like, well, now I can make my episode review in a week, and I've got content for the next 3 months, kind of a thing.
That's great. Are you guys, Eric? Are you looking forward to Lower Decks?
Oh, absolutely. I saw that trailer and I was laughing out loud because the tropes, they are baking in the Star Trek tropes and completely addressing them in a next generation setting. I love that trailer. I think it's going to be great.
I've just been watching The Boys because I have a thing coming up for it, and I hadn't watched it before it, but I've been binging it. So I've took a little break from Star Trek, been watching The Boys. Did not know this, but the guy that plays Huey, Jack
Quaid.
Jack Quaid is one of the ensigns on Lower Decks. Did not know that, and I'm going to ask him about this because I'm excited about Lower Decks. Like,
So that's actually interesting. So are you going to watch Lower Decks live, or are you going to wait?
Well, here's the thing. I was actually going to ask Eric this. Is it in canon?
They're saying it is in canon.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
They said that this takes place post Nemesis, so this is in that Next Generation time frame.
I'm gonna wait.
They're saying it's canon.
I'm gonna wait, but we're gonna do a show on it, which I'm probably not gonna be on because I don't want to get the experience ruined. I will say this though. I will almost guarantee you. When's it premiering?
August 6th, I think.
Yeah,
I think
it's like 3 weeks.
If projection serves right, by August 6th, I should be done with Discovery. Like I feel like I'm gonna be done with Discovery.
Well, I mean, Discovery, you've got 2 seasons and the short.
But they're shorter. How many episodes are in Discovery?
14.
Oh yeah, I'll be done with Discovery, and I'll probably be on the original series at that point. So I'm gonna end up flying through this. It's like Star Trek stuff. But like, I know that I know when we get to Next Generation, it's longer seasons, like 9 seasons or something, right? 7 seasons. 7 seasons. So I know that like those are gonna be longer watches. But I'm fully prepared for that because I do have this sense of nostalgia for Next Generation because I do remember like some of it. Like I remember bits and pieces. Like I remember there was one main cast member that I remember my favorite episode when I was a kid, and I don't know why I remember this, but I do. It was just giant blob creature that was like a black Pinotaur.
Yeah.
And like there was a woman, I think her name was like Yara or something.
Tasha Yara.
Yep.
And then she was like a cast member. She got swallowed up and she died in that episode. That I remember, and I remember loving that episode.
That was a huge deal.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because she was the main character and they killed her off.
Really? Interesting. So I remember that episode very clearly. And I can't wait to like revisit that because I just remember it from my nostalgia.
TNG is an interesting one to go back and rewatch because it is bingeable in a way because it is super episodic. So while the characters grow from season to season, the storyline obviously grows from season to season. You could kind of pick up, with the exception of like the 2-parters. Or and the season finales, you can kind of pick up almost anywhere. It's just like, okay, this is an episode of Star Trek.
Now, Donnie Pearson says Jerry O'Connell voices Commander Jack Ransom in Lower Decks. His wife Rebecca Romaine plays Lieutenant Commander Uma, first officer of the USS Enterprise NCC 1701 in Discovery.
Right. So she is Pike's first officer.
Oh, okay.
So she's a character from the original series. So
you'll see her in the pilot.
I do vaguely remember this character, and I remember in that pilot also the Doctor being this older gentleman with a white coat.
Yeah.
I do remember that, and I think Spock was in there too.
Yeah.
So I do remember a little bit from the cage. I'm just more excited to explore just kind of the lore of Star Trek because I'm also curious to see if there was a tonal change from the Gene Roddenberry era to anything post that, because I know that there is.
Yeah.
Because Deep Space Nine was basically post Roddenberry.
Really?
Right.
Fascinating. See, I'm telling you, man, this is one thing about Star Trek that like I'm finding more and more fascinating is kind of like this lore that I really never knew about that exists in the fandom. Like I had no idea about Axanar to that extent. I did not know that it was like a big fan film essentially gone wrong. I didn't realize that Enterprise was one of the only Star Trek shows to ever get canceled.
Yeah.
Also didn't know that.
Well, I mean, there were really only 2, Enterprise and the original series.
I didn't know the original series got canceled.
Yeah.
I actually thought it just ended.
Yeah, 3rd season was the final one because they got canceled, and the only reason it got a 3rd season was because of the fans.
Spock. Yeah, they're like that was one of the first campaigns to save a TV series.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Also,
back
didn't
in the 60s,
know that had it not been for Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, Star Trek would have not gotten made. I never knew that. Like, So I just feel like Star Trek is honestly the perfect storm of like if you're a fandom of something like to be a fandom of, Star Trek is a great choice because
Yeah.
there's so many different little nuggets that I'm
Mhm.
discovering that I feel that are like, oh shit, like I had no clue.
You know,
It's
honestly,
like treasure. It's like gold for me.
I'm excited for you to get through the original series and to start watching the original series movies.
Really.
Yeah, because the original
Oh, the
series
movies are awesome.
There's definitely a few clunkers, but overall, like all of them are pretty good. And there's some of them where like just watching them, you're like, they did this.
Um,
Like Star Trek 4, which is one of my favorite Star Trek movies, but
Yep.
it's all about going back in time and saving whales.
But honestly, see, you know what? So there's certain things now that I'll watch like when I'll read the description of Enterprise because I'll take little breaks between episodes. I
Yeah.
will not like I won't.
Just like one.
Well, I
after the
won't.
other
I
after the
won't
other.
ever interrupt like an episode as it's going because I want to get the full experience.
Right.
But there are certain things like I'll read a description, and if I know like the Zindi are in it, I'll be like, oh fuck, we're in for a ride. Or if I know they're going to like back in time or something like that's happening, I'm like, oh, here we go. But there's certain things like there's certain trigger things that happen, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a fun one. Like you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
so like I get really excited. Like I can only imagine if I were Eric and seeing like the little previews that they used to have. I'd have lost my shit. I would have
Yeah.
been like, there's no way I'm gonna do anything besides watch this. But like, but now like just even reading the descriptions, I get pretty excited about like
Mhm.
just what's gonna be happening. Like there's some
Right.
pretty cool episodes. Man, yeah, I'm so happy that we're starting at Enterprise though. It's such a great gateway.
Yeah, I'm like when you first kind of brought this up because we had a completely different idea for how we were going to do this.
Oh yeah, let me pitch it to Eric. So
I
the,
still kind of want to do this.
so the original idea that we were going to do for a Star Trek review show is to get Josh to cosplay as one of the officers, put a green screen behind him, and essentially he was going to be in charge of transcribing captain's logs. But that's the way that we were going to do the reviews. Is like him being like, and the captain did what? Like that was essentially going to
That's
be our
against
gateway.
protocol.
Yeah, that's against protocol. This is going to the high command. Like that's what we were going to do. And then the whole gimmick for every season was going to be like after the season, he's going to be like, you know what? I'm sick of doing these captain's log. Like for my ancestors, I'm gonna make sure that we're going to be known in Starfleet. And like his ancestor would have the same job except from a different season. So we were gonna do it like as a role play of him doing like these Star Trek reviews. But then I was like, I ended up watching Enterprise. I was like, dude, we got to like cover this like straight up and not as a gimmick because
Right.
I think the show's that good. And here we are, like I trying to do our best to. I mean, look, this is anybody that is watching. Like, this is not your typical like we're not gonna review the show like beat by beat. It's not what we're doing. More so, what we're doing is kind of taking a look back from this show aired in what 2001.
Yeah. Started in 2001.
Taking a look back of what they aired in 2001, seeing how an older fan like Josh kind of reacts to it, an expert fan, I would say like Eric reacts to it, and then somebody that's completely new, seeing if they like what their experiences are with it.
One of the things that I find really fascinating about this too is since we were both around. I mean, it's kind of like Power Rangers for you, but like this is something that I didn't really think about when we start doing like Power Rangers in space, and with Lost Galaxy. We'll see how we start discussing that, but remembering what life was like in 2000, 2001, 2002 when the show was being made, and correlating that to things that are going on in the show is just a completely different look at how.
I mean, that's like that was like Eric said about the 9/11 thing.
Yeah.
I would have never put those two things together. I just wouldn't have, because I think when I initially think of Star Trek, like events going on in like our real life are the last things on my mind.
Right.
So like I wouldn't have just put that together, but I do like instead of this really being a review show, it's really an experience show.
Yeah.
Like it's really a Star Trek experience. Like your experience with revisiting it, Eric's experience, because he was out of the three of us, he was the only one watching it live, and I'm the only one just watching it now for the first time. So like I find that so fascinating. But I will say, like, the way that I'm into Star Trek, it felt very much like I want to go to the Star Trek convention so bad. It feels very much like how I wanted to go to the first Morphicon that bad, where I feel like I just want to go as a fan straight up, like because there's so much I want to discover with the show. The series.
So let's make this decision right now. Provided everything is back to somewhat normal next year, Star Trek Las Vegas, which is the biggest Star Trek convention, which should be sometime in August. even if we don't get press access,
We're
let's
going.
just buy badges.
We're going. You down,
Yep.
Eric?
Buy them.
Oh, I'm down. I've not been to the Las Vegas show, but I've always wanted to go. I've been to a couple other Star Trek conventions, like here in Chicago. They're a lot of fun. It's fascinating and such a treat to meet fans that are new, old, and that's the best thing about the Star Trek community is, for the most part, everyone is just really welcome and opening. They're just open about, hey, this is why I love Star Trek. And to be in a room of people who just love Star Trek, you feel like I'm home. That's what it feels like. I feel like I'm home.
I feel like the Star Trek convention is going to be like the perfect mix of Morphicon and Gallifrey 1.
Well, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And the funny thing is, you have no idea how hard it is for me, with every fiber in my being, to not watch an Enterprise panel that the actors have been on more recently. No joke.
Well, there's all that stuff that's going. Like they're hosting right now. This virtual TrekCon, which I don't remember if you remember, but I think we talked to this dude, Ryan Husk. He was in that like space, like our first year at
It was like Space Command.
Space Command, which had a bunch of people from Star Trek in it. He has a podcast where they're doing reviews of Deep Space Nine. So it's Ryan Husk's host. It's called like the Seventh Rule, which is like a Ferengi reference.
Mm-hmm.
It's him. Cirroc Laughlin, who played Sisko's son in Deep Space Nine, and he has random guests on every once in a while. But now he's doing like this virtual TrekCon, and it's like all these people from Star Trek. And I'm like, this is.
But like no kidding. Like I was on YouTube just recently, and like an Enterprise panel popped up.
Yeah,
and it took me everything not to click it, because I didn't know that. We were talking about this a little bit. I didn't know Jolene Blaylock at first had some resistance to doing like conventions and stuff.
Right.
And now it's pretty open to it. But like I kind of just want to see like the actors, what they've been up to now. And like 90% of why I'm rushing through everything is just to see,
so you can go back and start
watch the panels. No joke. Like honestly, that's what I love watching, that kind of stuff. So like
and you can tell the crew they love joking around with each other. You can tell that they're really good friends in real life. And yeah, the Enterprise panels, anyone that I've seen like online or in person, they're hilarious.
I can't wait for, like, oh man, and it's also one of those things too where like if I end up loving this as much as I do now, like it's like, man, are they ever gonna, like, will the Enterprise ever get back from one like mission that I
and it's also fun. It's also funny to me because like there are so many people that have guest starred on like episodes of Star Trek that I'm waiting for you to do like one of these press junkets and get to someone who was in an episode of Star Trek.
Yes.
Because like I remember like a few months ago, I think it was you had interviewed Roxanne Dawson for like some documentary and had no idea that she was in Deep Space Nine.
No, I had no clue.
Voyager.
Sorry, Voyager.
Yeah.
Well, that same thing when I interviewed what's his name? For the writer from
Ronald Moore.
Ronald Moore.
Yeah,
I felt so like now looking.
Well, because I remember, because you told me about that. You were like, I had to interview this dude Ronald Moore. I was like, oh, that's the dude that's now doing Electric Dreams on Amazon. He had all this stuff with Star Trek, and
if I would have,
I was excited about that.
If I would have known that now, that conversation would have been completely different, and it would have just been like, hey, I know you're here to promote this, but I got to ask you a bunch of Star Trek questions now, like. Had I known that, it would have been one of those things. Like, truth be told, like I really hope for the day that like they're like, "Hey Joe, want to do Picard?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah! Like let's do it, bro."
Yeah, well, that's like me currently with The Expanse.
Yeah,
like when I got to talk to the cast from The Expanse at Comic-Con last year for Screen Rant, I was so happy.
So Eric, there's another question.
Sure.
You've been doing this Star Trek stuff for a while now.
Yeah.
Who's been for you, like in terms of the Star Trek community, where it's like I'm gonna get to either talk to or interact with this dude?
I remember the first captain I got to meet was Scott Bakula.
Nice.
And I met him at Wizard World Chicago in 2012. I went full VIP experience. I had like the premium badge, the photo shoot, this and that. And he's someone I grew up with, in the 80s from Quantum Leap and all that stuff. And so just like he wasn't just a captain. I'm like, this is like a real Hollywood guy. And you know what? He was one of the most down to earth, just nicest guys ever. And the reason I chose him over William Shatner, I mean, you hear all these stories about Shatner at conventions, and it's just like sign this, go away, sign this, go away kind of thing. But like Scott Bakula was just an amazing person to meet and talk to. And last year, I got to meet Kate Mulgrew for the first time.
Oh, very
She
cool.
was doing a book signing at a bookstore here in Illinois for her book that she wrote at the time. And like, she's my captain. Like, I love Janeway. Janeway is a fantastic captain. And to meet her in person and again, just a really great individual to talk to. So when you get to meet these people in real life, there's a little bit of starstruck, but at the same time, it's like, well, they're just people too.
Mm-hmm.
But holy crap, they were the captain of the Enterprise or Voyager, and so it's great. And like Kate Mulgrew, I mean, she's gone to do so many things,
Right.
like Orange is the New Black, and a lot of other things. And Scott Bakula too. Now he's 6 years in what is it? CSI?
CIS.
CIS. Yeah, New Orleans. Yeah.
Comic-Con two years ago, I was in the press line for Discovery Season 2. So there I got to talk to Snake Martin Green, Anthony Rapp, Wilson Cruz,
Nice.
Anson Mount.
Anson
And
Mount,
for talking with Anson Mount was really awesome too, because he's also a legit Star Trek fan.
Yes.
he was nerding out about he was just like, I'm Pike. Like, it was just so great. like hearing people like even Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz, like all these people that are on the show that are also fans of the show. Like, I would imagine it's like you talking with like Yoshi Sudarso about Power Rangers or Peter Sudarso. Like, they were like deep inside the fandom, and then they got to be on the show.
Yeah, it is fascinating, because I think there's a big difference though between Power Rangers and Star Trek for a couple of reasons, obviously.
Yeah.
But like one of the honestly glaring reasons is that I feel that like maybe it's changed a little bit in Power Rangers now, and Eric could probably speak about this a little bit too, more so.
Sure.
Is that like when you get the new cast reveal, it's a little bit different, but there is a sense of pride nowadays that it's like people like being the Red Ranger. Like, it's like a big deal. Like, being the Red Ranger is like a big deal, especially in the fandom too. But like in Star Trek, I feel like it's always been a prominent thing. Like, if you're a Star Trek captain, it's a pretty prominent thing, but not just in the fandom, but I feel like even in pop culture, like being the Star Trek captain is like kind of like a badge of honor, more so. Like, you don't really see that in Power Rangers. Like, in the mainstream, it's like, oh, that person was like, well, I guess you do with Austin St. John a lot, where like that guy's the original Red Ranger, right? But that's the biggest disconnect.
I think there's a similarity there too, in that, like, if you look at what the majority of actors from Power Rangers have gone on to do after that, and the majority of Star Trek actors have gone on to do after Star Trek, there's definitely a parallel. With their career trajectory, because like I feel like there are some, but there are few actors from Star Trek that have gone on to do things outside of that world.
Well, I think that another difference though too is sometimes for a lot of actors, Star Trek is more of a destination for actors. Right. And I think that Power Rangers is looked at least right now, more so as a stepping stone for something more grand. There are for sure actors that are like, Power Rangers is my dream. That's different. Right. But I feel that for Star Trek more so, it's kind of like, oh, you're on a Star Trek series? Like, that's hot shit.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like in Power Rangers, it's very much used to open your career up.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, I can see that, because I think back to like watching any of them. Star Trek, not Nemesis. I think it was Insurrection. Adam Scott is a bridge officer.
Oh, really?
That was First Contact.
Was that First Contact?
Yeah, he was on the Defiant when it was being blown up.
Yeah, what a cool name for a ship, the Defiant. That's so sick. Like, honestly, it's a cool name. But like, that was the thing that I agree with Eric, because I've seen the different Star Trek ships.
Right.
I think that the way that the Enterprise looks aesthetically is my favorite. Like
this Enterprise,
the NX01, I think is my favorite looking ship. And I also like the way the bridge looks. Like I don't know.
It feels like a submarine.
Yes,
That's what it
yes.
feels like.
It feels very like something I can walk onto and feels still modern.
See, I'm kind of partial to the Klingon birds of prey.
Oh yeah.
Just non-Federation ship wise, just because they look like a tactical warship. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the cool like I think that's another thing that kind of doesn't get enough credit, like in pop culture, is the Star Trek ships in general are pretty fucking awesome.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, you're right, because I can tell what a Klingon ship looks like just by the way it looks, and I'm not even
Yeah.
I'm just getting into it. Like it has a very particular aesthetic design.
Right, well, same thing with like
Oh,
the Romulans, like the was it the Romulan Warbird? Is
Yes.
that what they call theirs? Yeah, like their ships too. Like it's like actually the Romulan ships look similar to the Klingon ships, but there's definitely very distinct differences in there.
I just can't wait to really. Oh man, I can't wait for next week's. I think so. Let's rank this one. Let's rank this one.
All right.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So
as a newbie,
here's my here's my take on this one. It's not really a hot take. Here's my take on this one. So this is a great episode that sets up great character development, and it gives you pieces of the crew that are essential to the mission. And those pieces that you get are well written, and they explore the characters perfectly. I can understand. Initially, I would have said I wanted more from everybody else, but it doesn't. This episode doesn't necessarily need it,
right?
Because you'll get that. Listen, I'm 26 episodes this first season. There's enough time to get through everything. So for what it gave me, and it kind of and this was an actual like mission statement of what the show is. I'm gonna have to give this one another. I'm gonna give it a 4.5.
Okay,
4.5.
That's fair.
For the simple reason is it introduced me to other alien races. I knew clearly what the mission was. The moral conundrum was there. It gets sorted out, and we see the characters develop and are affected by what they saw previously, that they couldn't turn their backs away. I think that's very, very important to the storytelling of the show. The only reason I wouldn't say straight up 5 is that I can't give every episode just 5.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if I could, like I got to be a little critical. I guess the only downside I would say about that is that honestly, and it's not even really about this episode. The biggest downside for the episode is that I wish that I would get more Hoshi to follow up on in the next episode that could have carried over a little bit. But I mean, it's not even a huge gripe. But that's the only reason I couldn't give it a full-on 5.
Yeah.
But again, man, like this episode is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really well written.
Eric?
Oh man, yeah, it's so hard just not to say, oh man, this is a 5. Yeah, I think at the time, coming off of Broken Bow and even rewatching it today, I'd probably give it like a solid Warp 4 out of 5.
Yeah, that's a solid 4. Yeah. What about you?
Same. I'm actually really torn between. Like, it doesn't sound like much, but torn between a 4 and a 4.5. Because it, like you said, this and for me, this episode did a lot more world building with showing us who this crew was, not only character wise, but character wise as in who they are as people and what their not goals are, but what's the word that I'm looking for?
Their mission?
No, not their mission. Their moral center.
Okay.
Like
the moral compass.
Yeah. Like not only character wise, like who they are as in who they are, but like what they're made of, like what they're out to get, and what they see their role in the universe as. So it's like story wise, the actual story itself, it was good. It was fun. Pitting them against this new alien race, and having to have the Axanar come in and save them at the end, even though they had never met each other before. Like I felt it was a very solid story, and was able to show how they're getting out there into the universe and meeting new races. But like I feel like I don't know what was missing, but it felt like there was just like little bits and pieces here that probably could have been tweaked.
I also don't want this to go overlooked, because I feel that like for me, I'm a story-driven guy, but I don't want this to go overlooked. Is that the makeup and sets on this show are phenomenal.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Like honestly, that like
Yeah.
it's so easy to just glaze over that because you just assume it's sci-fi, it should look good, but no. I feel like the makeup and the actual set designs of this show are out of this world. Like they do such a great job of making me believe that these alien races exist, that like
they have their own culture, they have their own designs, they have their own way of thinking.
Out. I'm actually I'm very impressed by that.
And that's what Enterprise benefits from. It benefits from 20 years of previous Star Trek production and a crew that's knows how this well-oiled machine works. And they know what they need to do. They know they have the process down pat. So yeah, Enterprise is great for that. And to kind of highlight that cultural differences with aliens, the moment in this episode when Reed's like, how are we going to get in the ship? I'm going to plant spatial charges here and here. And Archer's just like, oh, maybe we just turn this dial and the thing opens.
That's great. But that's a great point, though. Honestly, I love that because how easy could that have been to be like, all right, let's make this an action thing. Let's get in there. Let's make it. They actually took the time and we're like, you know what? Let's not be the ones going in and just straight up ready for a fight type of thing. Let's use a little bit of valor and relax a little bit.
Right. Well, it's funny because that's also like one of those like cliche things that you kind of see sometimes. Like I still love it, but it's one of those things that you see in a lot of movies or shows or something where like this dude who's trying to show off or whatever tries like ramming a door and he can't get it open, and then someone else is just like and just turns the knob and opens it.
Yeah, but that's brilliant. But honestly, that's a great point though. Like culturally, it's distinguishing like the alien races culturally, like. And that's going to be something that we're going to talk episodes about the cultural differences between humans and other aliens are some of the best things. Like we talked about that in the first episode where the mom puts the breathing apparatus on the kid's mouth and then Trip is kind of like it's very defensive about it. And then T'Pol has to rein it in. That setup just there alone, to me, such a great moment. It's just teaching about tolerance of other races or other alien races isn't lost on me. And I think that Star Trek does such a brilliant job of delivering that message.
Well, something else that was brought up in this episode is the fact that the Vulcans don't know everything about the galaxy.
Yeah.
Because obviously they didn't know who the Axanar were. They didn't know who the aliens that were attacking the Axanar were. So, like, that's one of those things where if Archer had it said, no, let's go check out the ship, they would never would have met those people.
I'm not gonna lie, if I start watching Discovery and the Xindi show up, I'm gonna lose my shit. I will like flip out. I'll be like, no, this is gonna be awesome. Like that's what I'm so excited for though, because and you're right, Josh, the world building that they do in this show is very, very good. Like, and to Eric's point, not just making the character a ship, but actually building out the world and making it make sense and it all works.
Yeah.
Like, I think this show's phenomenal, like top to bottom. Like, looking back now, I'm actually quite surprised the show even got canceled. I'm surprised it didn't get a full run.
It was because of the time, like the early 2000s were just a very volatile time in TV in general.
Who do I take this up with? Brendan Baraga and Rick Bergman? This is who I take it up with?
CBS, probably.
CBS? And be like, hey, all access. Bring me back fucking...
Or actually, no, I guess it would, like back then it would have been Viacom because this was
another... UPN, United Paramount Network.
Yeah. Because this was like the first show that was... Or the first Star Trek show outside of the original series that wasn't made for syndication, right?
No.
Or was this
Voyager launched the UPN network.
That's right. Yeah, you're right. Right.
Well, I mean, I think we covered this episode pretty thoroughly. Yeah. Now, I mean, I think that we shouldn't call these reviews more Star Trek experiences because that's what we're really doing is really honing in on nostalgia. But in my case, it's my sense of wonderment about this whole universe because I think that like, and honestly, I mean, I hate to say this, but like, that's a little bit of that is lost on me with Power Rangers a little bit because I know the world so well. And it's very easy for me to get jaded in that world because I do know it so well.
Right.
This is complete.
Huh? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, Joe, for me as a longtime fan, to see you get so excited and passionate and just deep dive into Star Trek for me as a longtime fan, I'm excited for you.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm excited for you to discover all these like world building things, and I'm excited for you. Like, oh man, I can't wait till Joe watches blank 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 episode because he's gonna lose his mind. And so, as a longtime fan, that removes some of like the fan jadedness from me because I'm kind of like reliving that experience with you.
Honestly, this is the one thing I can say, no joke, that I'm really happy with this COVID thing. I know it's going to sound like a very strange sentence, is that I got to honestly discover Star Trek. And again, a lot of people Josh knows this very directly, but a lot of people don't, that are thinking that for me to be on this show was a struggle about 3 years in the making. Because at every turn that Josh pitched Star Trek, I shot it down. I was like, no, we're not going to do it. There's no reason. People aren't into it. Until I actually gave it an honest look and really opened it up. Honestly, I'm so happy that I was completely wrong about it, because I am so happy to be a Star Trek fan that I want to, like, you would have never thought I would have dove in as strongly as I did.
No, never.
But I can't pull myself out of it, and I'm proud of that, because I honestly think the show in its core has such a great message. It really does. But even on a technical aspect, storytelling wise, dude, it's all there. Like everything that I ever really liked is there. And like, that's why with Enterprise, I get so scared about I've never felt like this with Power Rangers or like Marvel. I get really concerned that I'm going to get spoiled on something that happened almost 20 years ago.
Well, it's funny because like with things like Marvel or DC, like not so much Power Rangers, but with those, you have a pretty solid base knowledge of the source material. Like what happened in the comics, you know about. So being spoiled in the movies or the TV shows isn't so much of a big thing, because there it's just like, oh, okay, they're going with this storyline or they're going with this storyline. You can kind of deduce where the show is going to be going once you know like the characters that they're using. So like that's why when like back when we were getting like all the spoilers for like Age of Ultron or any of the Marvel movies, I didn't care about hearing them because I was like, I know this stuff already.
Yeah, the lore is a little different. Same thing.
But Star Trek, like, it's like all that information just isn't like already in your face. So this is a whole new experience.
I think that the thing that I'm probably the most excited for, though, is knowing that certain captains have a certain tonal shift. Yes. And I'm excited to explore that, because now at this point, I'm so ingrained with Jonathan Archer, I honestly can't. I don't know how I'm going to react to Kirk.
Right.
Because I like Jonathan Archer so much. He is my idealized captain. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. But I'm also curious to see, because I know that I honestly don't remember much about Q, but I know that Q is like a big deal going forward in Star Trek. So I'm very fascinated to see how my reaction to something like Q is going.
Yeah, because like I feel like you get some of that like really kind of out there stuff in the original series, but with Enterprise it was a lot more grounded. You didn't have like Q is a very like fantastic.
Well, you know how much I love Harry Mudd.
Yeah, exactly. Q is very much like Harry Mudd. Where watching Enterprise, you don't really have characters like that in the show.
Well,
there's a couple.
You don't have characters that are as eccentric like that, but you kind of do, because Phlox is eccentric like that.
Yeah,
and I think that because you're ingrained with those characters already on the ship. Mm-hmm. And I think like you made the best point, Eric, about Travis Mayweather, is that when you first introduced him in that first episode, like he has so much adventure. We haven't even scratched the surface with that character, and there's so much more of the world to explore with him. And I want to go on his adventures. You know what I mean? Like there's this episode where they get to the what's the pleasure planet called? It's Risa. Like when they get to that episode of Risa, there's a little bit of buildup because they talk about it. It's like, oh, it's this planet, and you're like, okay, cool. But then you're like, oh shit, we actually get there. Yeah. And then to see how things play out there.
There's a great episode that takes place on Risa in Next Generation.
Well, It's funny. I actually didn't know that Risa was an ongoing thing in other series. I actually just thought it was created for Enterprise.
Oh, really?
I didn't know that.
I guess that makes sense because
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a Star Trek trope. But now I'm like, dude, like what? It's actually a really smart
Yeah.
idea to create this kind of pleasure planet where it's such a brilliant idea. And then when I didn't actually think we were going to get there on Enterprise. I actually thought they were just going to always talk about it and never go.
Right.
But then they go, and like, there's that part where Trip and Reed kind of they go to like this club thing, and they kind of get into hijinks, and it's like, of course this happens. It's like a Scooby-Doo episode, but I loved every single second of it. Like some of those episodes, like this next episode next week that they're going to talk about. I can't wait to talk about it because honestly, it has all the makings of a horror episode. The format of it being like this it's a Twilight Zone episode essentially,
right.
And all the makings for being like the perfect Star Trek episode are like there. I can't wait to dive into that.
What's the name of that next episode?
Strange New World.
Strange New World. That's right. Oh my god! Yeah. Honestly, that was as close to like Twilight Zone, and Twilight Zone is one of my favorite shows of all time. But it's as close to Twilight Zone as I can get in Star Trek, and I was all in for that. Like, I can't wait to talk about that episode next week because there's so many and it's also going to touch on these weird like because it's going to touch on these weird like little prejudices that Tucker has like just in his head that kind of rise to the surface a little bit.
Right.
They kind of get worked out. So I just can't wait to talk about that episode because I think it's very relevant to right now.
Yeah.
Well, you'll see where I'm going with that next week.
I'll be rewatching it during the week, and then we'll be back next week with trivia. From the episode, I'll make sure.
And Eric, we got you next week for it. We got you locked in.
Yeah, I'll be there.
I can't wait. Eric, let everybody know because you just dropped a Power Ranger episode today, and let them know about your Star Trek stuff too. Because now I'm going to go discover it.
Awesome. So,
wait, is it gonna spoil me though?
No, because we do certain episodes maybe, but. So the Star Trek podcast that I'm on, it's called the Starfleet Escape Podcast. You can find that at sfescapepod.com. And check out our archive because there are certain episodes where we just dive into a particular episode or we talk about like the captains or the first officers, stuff like that. Yeah. So we've been doing that for over 8 years now. That's a great podcast that we do, and that's on the Four Eyed Radio Network. And then for Power Rangers, I host a Power Rangers podcast called the Ranger Command Power Hour. Joe's talked about it a lot on Illuminerdi, so really appreciate you for doing that. And so we just dropped an episode that reviews the back half of the Necessary Evil arc in Power Rangers comics.
And believe it or not, a lot of people may not know this, but Eric is one of the main reasons why I started getting into like covering Power Rangers for us. It was his podcast and No Pink Spandex were the two things that I was like, oh, there are other people that are doing Power Ranger stuff. Like there was the first like two, and then that kind of inspired me to like want to start doing it on the YouTube side. So yeah, man, you got that. I still listen to your like my favorite stuff is the ones that you do in the Survivor mashups.
So we're actually planning another one coming up. So
those are a lot of fun. Those are really fun.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun doing that just because it's great to take characters that you know and put them into a new situation and figure out how they'll react to that.
You know, one of these days, the three of us should kind of create like what's our perfect crew, like taking different people from different.
Oh, that'd be really nice.
I'm down.
But Josh, I'm really doing your sign off. But what's your? My social media is Joe Illuminerdi.
We've got it all there.
So here's what I'm gonna start doing though. I think I'm gonna start. So I'm not gonna live tweet Enterprise when I watch it because I don't want it to distract from me actually watching the show.
Right.
But what I will do is I'm gonna give a brief like little summary of what I started thinking about each episode and maybe just kind of like feeding into that because there's honestly this whole Xindi thing. Like now that Eric kind of like let me know, like give me the heads up, like it was like the 9/11 kind of reaction stuff.
Yeah.
I never knew that, but now it's making so much more sense. But it doesn't take away from it. I actually love like that Xindi storyline, and I'm very curious to see how it all plays out. Another thing I don't know yet, and I do not want to get spoiled on it yet, is I don't know who's the mysterious shadowy figure guy yet. I don't know if it gets explained.
Okay.
I don't know who that is yet, and I'm very excited to figure.
I will not say anything about that.
Yeah,
excited to find
I
out.
won't either. I won't either until you get there.
Okay, good, because I'm excited to find that out because I love the main alien races that are involved in Enterprise, the Suliban, the Zindi, the Vulcans.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love knowing that they're going to be in certain episodes because you know that the action is going to pick up.
Yeah.
Also, love that Ferengi episode though. I'm not even going to lie. I think the Ferengis might be my favorite like forms of aliens because they're just, at least the group of Ferengis I met, they were just the like idiot goofballs that were arguing amongst each other. It was like,
you're really going to like Deep Space Nine then.
I love
Ferengis.
Ferengis.
I mean,
Oh,
we see the Ferengis a little bit in Next Generation and a little bit in Voyager too.
I just love their personality.
But there's a lot of Ferengi centric episodes in Deep Space Nine.
Good. I mean, look, exploration of the new alien races I'm all about, man. Those little bug guys creep me out that are part of the little Zindi crew also. But that's it. I mean, we know where we can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on both Instagram and Twitter at Vogue on Poetry Slam. I don't really use Instagram that much though, so find me on Twitter.
So go check out Eric's Power Ranger podcast and his Star Trek podcast. We'll be on next week talking more Discovery for our Enterprise. I don't know why I said Discovery. It's in my head right now. We're going to be talking more Enterprise and kind of talking about our experience with episode 3 next week, and I think that's going to be a fun one. I think that all of these are really good, though, but I'm not going to lie, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks.
So much fun.
We'll see you guys next week.
Eric, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.